the moderator will be Dr. Zainal Azhar, and he will start at 2:30. Okay, so no worries. I'll just put on some videos. While we wait for the attendees to come in.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll see you all in a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uma?
Yes, sorry.
Because right now I cannot share the screen, so you will give us the possibility to share when it comes to the time, right?
Yeah, sure. I can actually pass. Yeah, I can do it now.
Okay, can I just do a check?
Yeah, sure. I have passed you the presenter privileges.
Okay. I'll just do a check. If you tell me if you can see my PowerPoint. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just put it on the slideshow. Just bear with me. Slideshow. Is that okay?
Yeah, good.
Right. Okay.
Are you playing any videos?
No. We'll just do the presentation.
Okay. Remember that day we said we wanted to put a video to introduce.
It would be complicated, so we'll just go through the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. So only one slide, and you will tell us when Dr. Yousra will continue, right?
Dr. Yousra will continue on us from slide 26. 26. So
Okay, awesome. All right.
I'll briefly present myself and present the two institutions, okay? And maybe I'll briefly present Dr. Yousra as well, because otherwise it will break the flow of the presentation. And then she can take over from slide 26. Is that okay with you, or you prefer she introduces herself initially?
It's okay. The moderator has a bit about yourself as well, so I'll get him to.
So he will, okay, great.
Yeah. So I'll get him to introduce. Yeah, this
Okay, I stopped the sharing for now, right? Okay.
You're using a MacBook, so I'm not worried.
Yes.
MacBooks don't seem to have any problems with sharing, videos or slides. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so I'll just put a video on the loop, right? Okay.
Yes.
While we wait for more attendees to come in. Did you extend the invites to your colleagues?
Oh no.
You should. It's okay. You can.
Okay. I'll just send them an email.
Yeah. Do extend invites to your colleagues. Yeah. No worries. I forgot to inform you that you can do that. Yeah.
No problem.
Ready lah. Terus sampai lambat.
Cannot hear.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear now.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Santally, and also Dr. Yousra. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Fine. How are you?
I can't hear you. Your audio is a bit low.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay.
And for me, is that okay?
Yours is a bit low.
Now?
Better. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'll be your moderator for today and this session. And from the topic, I can see is upgrading teaching skills, scenario-based learning methodology. So there'll be two of you, and then what will happen is that I will introduce both of you, and then who is going to go first?
Issack.
Prof,
I will be going first, yeah.
you'll be going back. Right, Dr. Santali will be going back. Issack will be going back. And then it's about half an hour, and then we'll have some question and answers, and followed by Dr. Yousra, right? Would that be okay?
Maybe, in fact, I will be presenting the first part, and she will be taking over the second part. Can it
Right.
be questions and answers at the end, both of us?
Yes.
Because one present-
Yeah. There'll be one break, just to have a break, and then maybe one or two questions, and at the end, any questions will be both of you. Right?
Okay.
So we have about 1 minute to go. So yeah, we'll wait for 2:30 then. Oh. Okay, and begin. Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon here. I'm not sure what time is it there. So nice to have both of you together with us on this first day webinar. Today we'll be discussing a topic on upgrading teaching skills, scenario-based learning methodology, and its potential application for industry changes due to Industry 4.0. We have two very, very eminent persons with us from Mauritius University. Let me introduce them to you. The first one is Associate Professor Dr. Mohammad Issack Santally. Can you say hello so that they know you're here, Prof? Right, so that's Prof. Yeah, so that's Professor Dr. Mohammad Issack. And then we also have from Mauritius, that is Dr. Yousra. Dr. Yousra, can you say something? Yeah, there she is. Hello, Dr. Yousra. Right. So let me just read a bit about both of them, and then we will go into two sessions where Dr. Issack will talk about the first half an hour, followed by some question and answers. And then, of course, Dr. Yousra will finish the other half an hour, and then we have a common question and answers at the end. Please, for all sake of question and answers, use the chat room for you to start listing your questions, because I'll be looking at those at the questions, and whenever the time is appropriate, in half an hour's time and so on, we will be attending to the questions, right? Okay, first of all, Dr. Mohammad Santally is an Associate Professor of Education Technology. He joined the University of Mauritius in 2001 when the Virtual Center for Innovation Learning Technologies was established. Sounds interesting, the Virtual Center. He led the center from 2009 to 2017 prior to being appointed as Pro Vice Chancellor. His research interests are in learning design, OERs, interactive material development, and ICT in education policies. He was named the Outstanding Young Person of Mauritius in 2006, congratulations, and in 2010. He led the university to receiving Commonwealth of Learning Distance Education Excellence Award. So that is our first panelist, Dr. Mohammad Issack. For the second panelist, Dr. Yousra, she is an e-learning specialist She has specialized in education technologies and computer-based instructional design. She is a lecturer in education technology at the Mauritius Institute of Education and member of the Pole of Research on Innovative Pedagogies, Technologies and Practices in Education at the University of Mauritius. That's a rather mouthful there, all right? So it must be a very good center that we would like to see and visit, and probably something that we will like to learn a lot from, all right? So without further ado, as we are short in time, I would like to first pass the digital floor to Dr. Mohammad Issack for him to begin his presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you, Dr. Umar, as well, to invite us for this presentation. Our presentation today will focus on the design of scenario-based learning for workplace e-learning. And by workplace e-learning, we mean mainly onboarding employees or continuous professional development of employees in a rapidly evolving landscape. We will contextualize the presentation in the context of Industry 4.0 and the 21st century learning skills that will be needed to adapt to such evolutions and to prepare our students for the future of work. Before we get to the core subject, let me briefly present to you the University of Mauritius, because we can engage in collaborations at the end of such sessions. So for those of you who've never heard of Mauritius or the university, so this university was established in 1965 as the first and the only university of the country. It is a public funded institution. We have about 1,000 staff and around 300 academics and 700 support staff. We have a total student population of 10,000 approximately, repartitioned in 7 faculties: engineering, science, law and management, medicine, ICT, and social sciences. And we also have a few research centers: the Center for Biomaterials and Biomedical Research, one in tourism and hospitality management, one in slavery and indentured laborer, because we are a multiracial society with mainly immigrants in Mauritius, and a Center for Innovative and Lifelong Learning, which is previously known as the Virtual Center for Innovative Learning Technologies, which I used to head. While I briefly present the institute of my colleague, Dr. Yousra, the Mauritius Institute of Education, just next to us, our neighbor. It is also a public institution which is responsible by the law for national teacher training in Mauritius, covering pre-primary, primary, special needs, and secondary education training. It engages in a broad range of educational research, curriculum development, and professional development of pre-service, in-service educators and teachers as well. So that's very brief. Okay, so let's come to the core of our subject, Industry 4.0, and education in principle. So we educate students with the objective for them to be ready for life challenges and the world of work. That's the basic principle behind our education system. So we want our students to be able to lead a decent life once they leave the university or the education institution. So often our education systems, they are designed to adapt to the requirements of the industrial landscape. Okay. So this industrial landscape has evolved significantly from the concept of Industry 1.0, which is mainly the pre-electricity era, where we were using water and steam-powered mechanical components, to the Industry 3.0, where computers and automation played a dominant role in our factories, until we reach what we call now the I 4.0, Industry 4.0, which is a large-scale and highly complex integration of mechanical, electrical, electronics, automated and connected systems together to shape the world of our new types of factories and manufacturing. So what do we really mean by Industry 4.0? So we are talking here about autonomous robots, integrated systems, Internet of Things, simulations, additive manufacturing or 3D printing, cloud computing, augmented and virtual realities, the use of big data, cybersecurity, amongst others, all within one ecosystem, which we will see in the next slide. So in an Industry 4.0 setting that others refer as the smart industry, as we can see, all the technologies work and talk to each other within an established ecosystem. An expert in big data, for instance, needs to be able to contextualize his skills in different sectors and areas within that business value chain. Machines are controlled from tablets over the cloud, and these machines could be talking to other machines which are distributed geographically, so they need to be connected to each other. Real-time data, for instance, could be used for intelligent decision-making. Okay? As an example, we could prioritize the development of one specific product over another in the production line depending on the real-time variation in demands. To address the human capital development for such an ecosystem, the key question is whether our educational models, our current educational models and systems are adequate enough. When we look at the skills that any person operating at any point within such an ecosystem, it is clear that there is a need for a variety, a panoply of skills, competencies, and knowledge which are needed. Such attributes, though, are not necessarily only core technical competencies, as we used to be. Someone in computer science would be trained only in computing. But they need to develop other abilities such as decision-making, leadership, and other interdisciplinary knowledge such as project management, for instance. The learning environment needs to also provide them with some immersion and incursion into the real world, not only on the theoretical aspect. As we can see from that previous slide, the smart industry is based on the acquisition, application, and generation of new knowledge. And that is through the development of what we call a knowledge society. The development of the knowledge society is essential to sustain the emergence of Industry 4.0. So what do we need to achieve that? What type of education for the knowledge society to kick off? So here it is obvious that our existing education system shoots the industrialization era, but limited to the Industry 2.0 and to some extent Industry 3.0. Our education system is suited to produce, for instance, if you look at the schools, how we operate, to produce disciplined manpower that learns to work from 8 to 5 in a linear process model. Or we've seen in the Industry 4.0, the linear process model no longer holds. So to address these challenges posed by Industry 4.0, we need a transformation of the actual system. And here I often like to quote Bill Gates, who said that there is not a need to reform our education system, a need to replace them, but I will prefer the term transform them to address 21st century challenges. And another quote that I'd like to share is from Alvin Toffler, who says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So that should be the essence of any education system that we put in place, where the students need to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn new skills as they go through their career, okay? Not only within the university. So this leads us to the 21st century education framework and skills. We have three core aspects of the 21st century learning. First one is foundational knowledge, or the core content knowledge that you need to know. For example, a student in an engineering degree needs to know about basic scientific and engineering principles related to the discipline. But he or she also needs to have ICT literacies and other cross-disciplinary knowledge, such as mathematics, some computing, and management knowledge. So that forms the core of the knowledge that they need to get within their training. However, once they have this knowledge, what is very important is to know how to apply it, how to act in a real-world situation. So this is what we call the meta-knowledge, the ability to act, to use this knowledge to good essence. And this entails the ability to solve problems, to think critically, to work in teams and communicating with colleagues to find solutions, and the ability to apply innovative techniques to solve new problems. Finally, in that framework, there is what we call the humanistic knowledge, the ability to value what surrounds us in terms of culture, ethics, and emotional intelligence. For instance, nowadays, someone in Mauritius working in an industry has to work with people geographically located in different areas of the world. So they need to know about different culture. This is what we call cultural competence. So these are all the traits of the next generation worker who wants to evolve in an I 4.0 setting. So therefore, the characteristics of 21st century learning or education framework can be summarized as such. So it is personalized, it is media-driven, it is learner-centered, it is networked, it is virtual and global. So what does it work in our current education system? Well, this slide is a list of some of the concepts deemed obsolete in 21st century schools. We are not saying irrelevant because they are still there, but things that we have to question again. So nowadays we talk of more bring your own devices than the need for computer labs in the schools. Okay. However, we must be wary of the growing digital divide as well. We've seen how the COVID-19, for instance, has technology within the COVID-19 emergency remote teaching has widened the gap because those students who cannot afford technology were left aside. Okay, so we need to be wary of the digital divide. The concept of isolated classrooms will be obsolescent as more and more classrooms get virtual, digital, and connected to each other. On the other hand, policy makers must review their decisions not to allow personal devices like smartphones and tablets in classrooms by students. Not so many years ago, few years ago, in the schools, we will confiscate the telephone devices of students. Students nowadays even cannot bring their phones to the classroom. But on the other hand, we are talking about technology-enabled pedagogies. So there is a kind of a mismatch there. There is a need to look into these things. Libraries are getting digital, and library spaces have to be redefined to foster communication, teamwork, and other skills required for the 21st century. Who doesn't recall the library to be a quiet and isolated feeling in a library when you sit in a library? Okay, so these type of things are changing. While many would advocate a change in teaching and learning approaches, okay, we still find a lot of resistance. I don't know whether it's the case in Malaysia, but definitely in Mauritius, for academics to adopt alternative and appropriate modes of assessments. We don't want to reconceptualize our assessments. We want to teach differently, but we want to have the same type of exams, the standardized tests, to measure the learning of our students. So departing from a traditional closed book exams is still a major challenge in many universities and institutions. Finally, last but not least, the one-size-fits-all teaching has to be replaced with more personalized and customized learning pathways. So just to summarize this slide, a little picture that will test all these animals about their ability to climb on a tree. Okay, so what pedagogy for the 21st century teaching? Traditional teaching and learning, we all know, favors a more behaviorist model, resulting in passive learning in the classroom. This is also what we call the one-size-fits-all example. So one lecture, everyone listens. The same mode, everyone listens. So however, that does not mean that by just shifting to online learning or using technology-enabled environment, that will result in some active learning experiences. For instance, instead of using the whiteboard, or the blackboard, you use a whiteboard or you use a TV screen just to present something, will not bring a fundamental change in the way you are teaching. Just like now, what I'm doing in this webinar doesn't bring a fundamental change if we were in the same room physically and I would be presenting. Okay? So whether it is that pedagogy that we want for the 21st century, that's the question. Okay? So let's move on to the next slide. So therefore, using technology-enabled learning to promote active learning and to address the needs for I 4.0, we need to integrate new pedagogies and approaches for the development of competencies to discuss, analyze, innovate, and communicate. Okay, so again, this is a slide to an analogy to tell you how our current education system works. So students are basically silent in classrooms and never ask questions. Therefore, in a technology-enabled learning environment, we can have basically two approaches. The first one on the left, which is practically the digitization of content into ebooks or website versions, and hence with some graphics and videos. This is what we refer to as content-driven e-learning. So in essence, we take materials, we digitize them, we add some value, and then we use the network as an additional means of dissemination. That doesn't change quite a lot as compared to classic teaching and learning. Then we have the other approach that we will call activity-based learning, where a course takes the form of a set of activities that are interlinked and designed to help the student to achieve the intended outcomes and acquire the competencies. At the end of a course, for instance, an artifact is produced, and at the end of each activity, parts of that artifact are developed, that they will be put together to develop the bigger product. This means that there is a need to revisit the learning design principles and a paradigm shift in teaching and learning. Okay. So for a reconceptualization of learning to occur, it is not only necessary to provide the flexibility to learn anytime, anywhere, but most important of all, we need to learn differently. We need to learn just in time and in situated learning contexts. Technology has to be seen as a mediating instrument. Okay, that we will see. So if in this slide, you see this small grid matrix below, often we think that with technology we will promote active learning. This is not true. Or we think that the more sophisticated the technology, the more we will engage into active learning. In fact, you can have low performance technology. I don't know whether you can see my mouse here. It's slot D. You can have low performance technology and result in passive learning. But you can also have low performance technology which results in active learning. Vice versa, you can have high performance technology which results in passive learning, while you can also have high performance technology that results in active learning. So what's the key question? What's the main principle here? It's about how you use the technology to design the learning experience, and not just using the technology in teaching and learning. So that what do you do with the technology is more important than the complexity of the technology. So therefore, technology is seen as a mediating instrument for cognitive stimulation, skills development, ad hoc learning, and knowledge construction and sharing. So we have three phases: acquisition of knowledge, application of knowledge, and more importantly, the construction and generation of new knowledge and sharing of that knowledge. So the key, if I may say, is learning design. Okay. So this is an example of a course, that was designed using a content-based approach. Okay. As we can see, it is an equivalent of a web-based ebook, and it fits well in what we call content management systems. So a student has a study guide, has some contents in HTML format, has some instructions to do their practicals on their computers, and the information about their assignments. Okay. So this course, it is in fact the first e-learning course that we developed at the university, where we converted a face-to-face course into an online distance learning course. So what we did was just to take the traditional manuals and digitize them and put them available on a CD or on a website. So this course, it follows the classic behaviorist learning model, what we refer to as a tell and ask approach of instructional design. So you read something, then you have a small question, you answer this, you refer to the notes, you answer it. So it's a classic tell and ask approach. So such courses then can be supported by some communication tools like forums and so on. Okay. So what are the key concepts behind it? It is a classic approach. It fits well with content management systems. It is behaviorist, and then you can support it with some communication tools, which we've covered. This is an example of some value addition in a content-oriented model. So here what we do is we apply what we call a rapid e-learning method to take a PowerPoint, put some animations in it, and put some voiceover, publish that as a video, and it becomes a video lecture that we send to the student that we can post online. Okay? So, but this is essentially multimedia, but following a content-based approach. Okay. This is an augmented form of an educational website with interactive, what we call interactive ebooks that can incorporate different media, such as videos and graphics. This is another form of content-oriented models where we can have interactive walkthrough in the form of a screen capture or recorded demos, as we usually call them. And there are other forms of content that provide learners with demos or step-by-step tutorials of how to carry out specific tasks or how to use the specific software or interfaces. Okay. So often we think that when we incorporate such an element in our course, it adds value. Yes, indeed, it adds value. But the thing is, has it transformed your teaching and learning practice? Not necessarily, because in a classroom, in a lab, you would have followed that step-by-step tutorial with the student following that step. Here is just a resource that helps the student to learn by themselves. So we now come to the activity-based approach. In this model, we do not structure a course in terms of topics or weeks, but we organize the course as a set of sequential learning activities. As you can see in this slide, we look at a course that we developed, and the course was called Education Technologies and Computer-Based Learning Environments. So it was targeted to teachers who wanted to know how they can use technology in their classroom. Okay? So the idea was to bring teachers to use ICT to conceptualize a simple educational website for their learners. So the learning design team, therefore, decided to conceive 5 learning activities to help the learners to get to the basic concepts, then to use an instructional tool to model the course according to their preferences, then to prototype that course using PowerPoint, how it will look like, and then to use a software, any software that they can use, to finally build that educational website. So at the end of the course, they have developed an educational website. We can argue it's kind of a mini project. And then they will reflect on their learning process. So why do we promote activity-based approach? What is the case to support activity-based e-learning? Well, the problem, as we say, with what we call reproductive tell and ask approach, whether in traditional lecture or a classic content-based e-learning, is that the students can't apply what they learn. For instance, in this presentation, I am talking about activity-based approach. We are talking about we are showing you video lectures, activity-based learning, but that doesn't mean you can go next after this presentation and you start implementing activity-based approaches in your courses. So, although you learn about it, you read about it, you cannot necessarily apply it in a real-world setting. So therefore, how do we get them to acquire knowledge and apply them? That's where activity-based learning comes in. The students get engaged in authentic incremental learning activities to produce one or more artifacts. As you can see here, in one step they produce part of it until they can design the full artifact. So then in such a situation, we ask ourselves, what do we do with content? Where does the content go? So when the content here, in this case, becomes resources that you can see here, tutorials, papers, books, slides, that the students will use while they are working on each learning activity. The content becomes resources and not the subject of the learning itself. So as such, in such a context, one would say, but what is the role of the teacher? Because here we think that the teacher knows everything and he has to communicate, transfer this knowledge to the learner. So the role of the teacher then is to orchestrate this learning activity, conceptualize this learning activity, then monitor the learner's progress and guide them into completion of the activity. So that's a redefinition of the role of the teacher in this situation. So in our model of activity-based learning, each learning activity has an initialization phase where we define the scope of the activity. Then there is a planning phase where the activity is broken down into tasks and subtasks that the student has to follow to complete that activity. Then, after the planning phase, the student actually executes the activity to achieve the outcome. And at the same time, we have to engage into monitoring and control phases of the activity. We have to manage the activity. We have to help the student throughout this activity. And at the end, we proceed to what we call closing the activity, where we evaluate the learning experience of the student. And often it's a self-evaluation of the student's own learning experience within an activity, what he's learned, what he's not learned, etc. So in this slide, we can see the actual form of a learning activity and a sample output when the students execute the learning activity. So on the left, you have the instructions given to the students, and on the right, you see the product that they develop. The interesting thing here is while all the students will develop a website, we will get different designs, different concepts, and its structure. This is not based on rote learning or the one-size-fits-all lecture model. Each student will apply that skills in their own specific way. You will have different designs, different learning approaches, different pedagogies infusing that. So each student will have the leeway to infuse their own personal touch to some extent. So our philosophy here is based on two guiding principles. That of liberty and guidance. Okay, liberty and guidance. So liberty in the sense that we promote open collaboration and free construction on the one side. And on the other side, we provide guidance through scaffolding. Scaffolding means support to the students. Okay, you give them time, you support them, you tutor them, you train them, you give them content. Okay, so you scaffold their learning process and monitor the progress of their learning throughout the activity. So if you give a student an activity and then you say, okay, come back after 3 weeks, show me what you've done, then you'll be surprised because this activity has to be monitored and followed through time. It's not just you give them and then you wait for them to come with the product. Okay, so in so doing, what we do, we promote creativity and innovation on one side. When you give them liberty, free construction and open collaboration, you help them to develop their creativity and innovation. On the other side, while monitoring them, okay, keeping track of what they are doing, you are adhering to your own quality assurance mechanisms and you are focusing on the achievement of the learning outcomes of the students. Okay, so in terms of a broader educational philosophy framework, we rely on three main elements: the technology, the pedagogy, and the content, okay, which are used to support a community of learners to engage in authentic learning and as outcomes to develop competencies and skills relevant to their 21st century needs. Okay, so that's my part, and Dr. Yousra will take up from there on coming to scenario-based learning. So if there is any question at this stage, I will be happy to take them.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Issack, for that opening introduction to activity-based learning and so on. There are two questions here that may need for you to answer. The first one is, what type of assessment do we need for the fourth industrial revolution? What type of assessment, do we need for the fourth industrial revolution?
Right. You see, this is what I was talking on one of my slides. If you look at the skills that we require for Industry 4.0, there are a multitude of skills. But if you look at our education system, what do we assess students on? It's only the core subject knowledge, okay? So we will give them a written exam papers, and then we will assess their learning based on that. But this type of learning is no longer valid. But our education system, our universities, we get the difficulties to get academics to shift from that one to, let's say, a project-based learning assessment. If you give a student an activity to do, you have to assess the student on the output of that activity. You don't give the student a paper at the end and then ask them questions that they will have to record. So these type of assessments, so we need to define our assessments. Why do we give students written exams? You know why? Because we want our examination systems to be, to rely on integrity, okay? To be reliable. And how we define reliability and integrity of our assessments is when we put everyone on the same page and we say, okay, close your books, now write and say what you need. Or we cannot have an alternative to proving the integrity of our assessment, then we have a tendency to retain the actual mechanism of assessment while saying that our students need to have new skills. If you need to give the students new skill, you need to assess them on that new skill. You cannot assess them on only what you've taught them in terms of theory. So moving to that principle, we can say a student, let's say an engineering student, needs to develop the artifacts, assess the quality of the artifacts, give them a rubric. Okay, when you follow them in the activity, you are ensuring the integrity of the process, because the student doesn't just come after 3 weeks and gives you a product that you are not sure if the student has developed the product. If you can follow the progress of that student, you will assess them on the basis of the skills and competencies they have acquired. You should not then be afraid of whether they cheated or not. So we are afraid of cheating. This is why we say all the students come at the school, sit down, close written exams. But we need to look at the validity of a closed written book exam. Think of a student who learns programming. And then we ask a student to write pieces of codes on paper. When that student in the workplace, he is supposed to write the pieces of code on a computer, troubleshoot those codes, write good code, okay, and see the outcome. We've seen students in our university who cannot write pieces of codes on paper, but today they are leading teams of programmers in the industry. And we have to think at some point in time whether our current assessment model is reliable enough to address the challenges of the I 4.0, or whether it just satisfies ourselves to say that we are able to prove the integrity of our assessment. So you see, it's a question of the integrity and reliability of the assessment.
So there's a lot of having trust, I suppose, in this new, in this new era between the institution, the lecturers, and the students. That's something. Sorry?
It's a mindset that we have to cultivate, a mindset change on both sides.
Right.
Because let's say, just to add on that, let's say a student cheats in the exams and we don't catch the student. So, but this is an essential value that we want to inculcate in our students for 21st century learning when they are going to operate in their workplace.
Okay, thank you so much for that. The second question comes from Dr. Umar. Can e-learning alone be really more effective than traditional teaching? Can online learning alone be more effective than traditional teaching to train students to be ready for 4IR?
That's a very interesting question because for the past 20 years, I've been advocating for uptake of e-learning, but mostly ICT-enabled pedagogies at the university. And we've been getting a lot of resistance from our fellow academics who will tell you that face-to-face is better. Then, when you look at the COVID-19 situation, everyone moved to online and said, okay, we can teach online and we can give our students assessment and accept them. So it's not a question of whether one is better than the other. It's a question, again, of learning design. Okay? Why are we today doing this webinar virtually? Because we have a problem of COVID. We cannot travel, we cannot meet together. But we are achieving the outcomes because the aim was for me to make a presentation for you to get the knowledge. If we say that we have been able to do that, then the learning is successful. So whether it's e-learning or face-to-face, there is no comparison which is better. It all boils down to the way you design your course. So if I just send you a document to read, what is the difference? Is it because I've sent it to you by email or because I've sent it to you by DHL? No, it's what's written in the document, how I'm communicating to you in that document. So the mode of delivery is not important here. It's the pedagogy. However, you will agree that technology can help you with tools that augment your classroom teaching. Imagine the blackboard and imagine a projector. What has just the technology brought into? Some value addition where you can play a video, whereas on the whiteboard, a blackboard, you would not have been able to play that video. So it's not a question of which one is better. I think both of them are complementary. That's why we talk about blended teaching at the university, especially in small countries where people can travel easily. We talk of blended learning. We talk of flipped classroom pedagogies. Some part of it can be done online, some part can be done face-to-face. Right now, I often use this analogy in distance education. Right now, are we not face-to-face, Prof? I'm seeing you less than 1 meter on my screen. But if we were in the same physical space, we would have been maybe 1 meter because of COVID. I mean, distance, social distancing. So it's just a technology here which is different. We are doing it in a classic way, okay? A classic presentation which is face-to-face, but virtual, okay? So it depends on the pedagogy.
All right, thank you, Prof. Just one last question. This is from me. How would you define what hybrid teaching is? Hybrid teaching, we've heard of it a lot of times. I get confused with blended learning. So what is hybrid learning?
In fact, hybrid teaching is a form of blended learning. When people talk of hybridization, it means they do part of their courses face-to-face, part of it online, okay? But online because it's a technology, but for me, hybrid teaching would be a teaching that includes a variety of approaches. For instance, you can have a classic lecture, then you have a tutorial, I mean a discussion, then you can organize presentation. Some part can be online. So it's a mix of teaching and learning methodologies. For me, this is hybrid teaching. Blended learning is often when you have part of it face-to-face, part of it online. Okay? The hybridization of teaching, for me, the term, but often we use it interchangeably, hybrid to be blended in fact. Okay? Just not to, comme si, in French we say français, to, I mean to keep into the different sensitivities of our colleagues academics. So we tell them, those who are against online, we'll tell them, okay, do some blended, do it hybrid, use some technology. So that's the way the term, because some people will argue, and it's right, it's true. In engineering, for instance, you cannot just say everything is done online. You cannot train medical students everything online, although there can be simulations. At some point in time, they need real bodies, they need real experiments. Okay, even if nowadays we have simulated bodies, but they need to have that hands-on practice, which they cannot get fully in a digital environment. So that's what we call the hybridization, the merge of technology in traditional teaching. But they
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much for that piece of information and then answering the 3 questions. We'll get back to you once Dr. Yousra has completed her presentation. Now, Dr. Yousra, we are ready for your bit for the next 30 minutes. The digital floor is yours.
Dr.
Thank
Yousra, will
you.
you be sharing your screen, or do you want me to?
No, please. Can you please lead it, please? I will just
Okay,
follow. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Oh, using the same slides. Okay. All right.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Santally, and thank you, Uma. Okay, so like it was discussed before in the previous slides about the different approaches that can be used for curriculum development and pedagogy. So the question now is activity-based learning a sufficient response to Industry 4.0 teaching and learning needs? Well, to some extent, yes, but there are limitations. As in some areas of training, it is important that learners get immersed in the work-related environment to better adapt in the workplace. So, continuous professional development is an important requirement in Industry 4.0, and especially to develop the 21st century skills. Therefore, we need to push the concept of learning design further, okay, to conceive what we call learning scenarios within an activity-based learning ecosystem. So, what is a learning scenario? Okay, a learning scenario, it is basically a description of a learning situation, so independently of the underlying pedagogical approach, but the goal is to ensure that the appropriation of a precise set of knowledge, competencies, and skills. Okay, so in a scenario-based learning, normally learners are exposed to an immersive training environment where they meet realistic work challenges and get realistic feedbacks as they progress, since, you know, everything that happens reflects the learner's choice. In scenario-based e-learning, we generally follow the design cycle as illustrated here. So we start by selecting a particular skill to be developed. We then identify and describe the scenario. Okay. We create a storyboard to validate the scenario concept. We convert the scenario into a scene or set of scenes. We add interactive elements such as feedback, questions, answers, dialogues, etc. And finally, we publish this scenario and implement them in the e-learning environments. So we shall have a look at each step as from the next slide using a case study for the onboarding of a check-in agent at the airport. So in this slide, we looked at the skill set needed to train a ground staff who will be handling the check-in process of passengers at the airport for a specific airline. And the skill to be developed is to welcome passengers at the check-in desk and handle the check-in process until the printing of a boarding pass. Next, yeah. So in the second step, we describe the process model, as you can see here, for the contextual application of this skill set. So we need to understand the process so that we can conceive the learning scenario. Okay. So here we are using a modeling tool called MOT, M-O-T, okay, to devise the flowchart for the process. But we can broadly see the process, the consequences, the sequences, the conditions to meet to finally print a boarding pass. Next, yeah. So once we understand the process, in some cases we call that the knowledge engineering phase. We then conceive the learning scenario to put the learner in the context. We have to describe the flow, the dialogues, the scenes, how they will happen as accurately as possible. Okay, we can see in such a scenario, the agent learns about the technical aspects of check-ins, but also about the courtesy towards the passenger. Next, yeah. So here, learning designers will then develop the storyboard that acts as a prototype, okay, to model the scenes. This is important as it can be very time consuming and costly, because if we have to change the learning design or maybe adapt any kind of scenario after it has been implemented, that can become very difficult. And the storyboard is actually an important documentation, and it is part of the quality assurance and good design principles when it comes to learning scenarios. So here we can see how a different scene is modeled as a sequence from the previous scene. Yeah. So when the storyboard is validated to develop the scenes by first developing the graphics, and then secondly assembling the scene by animating each sequence. We then add interaction and dialogue. In some cases, we can prompt the learner to choose a course of action or even to make a decision while he or she is immersed in the scenario. For instance, here when the agent asks the passport, okay, the system can randomly select a few possibilities, such as the traveler saying that he does not have the ticket or the passport on him. So in that situation, the checking agent will have to choose the next course of action. Depending on his or her choice, he or she can obtain a feedback from the system. So this is just an example of the continuity of the scene, okay, where details of the passport is shown to the learner who is in this scenario playing the role of the checking agent. And in a particular situation, for instance, he may be presented with an expired passport. Next. So the following two slides will demonstrate further scenes in this scenario until the completion of the check-in process. Next. And in this slide, the boarding pass is printed and handed to a happy traveler. So it is important to stress as well that in learning scenarios, small details matter, such as in this case, the facial expression of both of the actors in the process, highlighting the other skills that are required on top of the core and knowledge of how to check in a passenger. After the scenes are mounted in the offering software, we publish them in a compatible format to be exported to the LMS, that is the Learning Management System. So we have different options to publish the resource. It can be in HTML5 or ISCOM compliant resources, which can be hosted on any e-learning platform. Next. So in this slide, it shows how the learning scenario appears in an e-learning platform. Okay. And next. Here. No. This one. So the e-learning platform will have functionalities to track the learner progress, okay, within this scenario and throughout the course. Next. So, if we want to redefine teaching and learning through innovative ICT-enabled curriculum, capacity building of educators is central to the process, okay? Here, I would like to quote what Professor Bob Moon said in 2010, and which is still very much valid today. So, there is absolutely no way the bricks and mortar institutions of teacher training created in the last century will be adequate for the 21st century needs. The training needs of new and existing teachers far outstrip the capacity of existing institutions. Next. So, we need to be able to transform our educators into agents of change, okay? In Mauritius, we organize regular workshops on technology-enabled learning for teachers just to encourage them to adopt new pedagogies and technologies and, in fact, to act as change agents in their respective schools. Now, coming back to the teaching and learning requirements for Industry 4.0, it is important, to understand that for innovative teaching and learning to occur, there's a need to implement the right ecosystem and right policy framework to achieve these objectives. So policymakers have to understand that they need to ensure policy coherence within and among the key pillars just to sustain Industry 4.0 4.0 development. So we need a sustainable funding model. We need the right ICT infrastructure that will support three key aspects, which are innovation, capacity building, and curriculum for the 21st century learning. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, we will be welcome to answer them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yousra. Now I understand what you mean by workplace e-learning, because once I see how you lay out that small course or subject about the ticketing process, then the whole idea of workplace e-learning, I understood it very clearly. I have to say that when I first saw that title, I was confused with the concept of work-based learning.
Okay.
Right? So I was thinking, how are you going to have an e-learning in a work-based learning type of scenario? Well, you're talking more about activity-based and then very much contextual-based and so on. Okay, I understand. Can I have one question? Okay, I got one question here. The question goes as such. Can you share how do you go about training instructors to do scenario-based learning for their courses? What skills are needed and what software to use? Do you work closely with industry experts to develop learning scenarios?
Okay. So we have to, we need to train our students, okay, actually to develop 21st century skills. And we have to apply the same model to our pre-service and in-service teachers, including academics, okay? And of course, we need to organize workshops, ad hoc trainings, closely with industry, of course, using ICTs for teachers. So such approaches will not necessarily yield the expected result, as we need to establish a framework for capacity building. But there are different types of training on learning design, on new pedagogies, technology-enabled pedagogies, and there are alternative modes of assessment that we need to carry out so that we can train our different stakeholders. Well, to create the different e-learning scenarios, we have a process that we need to follow. And in terms of the software that we use, it can be any kind of software, but all depends on learning design. So scenario-based learning is one type of learning design. So the key is learning design.
Okay, thank you so much. You wanted to add something?
Yes, if I may add, I think Dr. Yousra missed that part about the industry experts to develop learning scenarios. Maybe if you want to highlight this scenario on airport check-in, that is a work that we did collaboratively with a company that wanted to train their staff. It's a real project that for companies who wanted to train their ground staff who were recruited to as check-in agents at the airport. So these learning scenarios is very important to say that, especially when they are linked with industry, an academic alone would not be able to design it, because you need that, as you say, that contextual application. So you need to work with those people already in the industry, because you need to extract that knowledge from them. This is what we call the knowledge engineering principles. Okay.
To me, that might work within certain types of knowledge. For example, if we in the TVET domain, we are very much into hands-on types of education, where the training aspect and the expertise level, competence, skills, and so on and so forth is not much on. Well, there are some programs that have got some competencies on how effective you are in dealing with customers and so on and so forth. But the rest of the program looks at the students and it being enabled to have some psychomotor skills, right, that they must master before graduating. So I was thinking, how can we fit scenario-based learning for those kind of courses?
This is, if I may, yeah, very interesting question. This is why we say that when we stress on the learning design, because over the years, I had the same problematic, the same challenges in terms of my colleagues challenging me, saying that I have to teach that, I have to teach this, and your model doesn't fit it. That is e-learning in general. So this is where we look at the learning design and the pedagogies. For instance, if we agree that the flipped classroom model is the way forward, okay? So the flipped classroom, essentially what it means. The theory part, the lecture part that you want to teach the student, the background you want to give them, you can give that to them as an online component. You can give that to them as a pre-recorded lecture, okay? And then when you bring them in the classroom, there you focus on your practical skills on the real machines. So there is no way e-learning will help you to do that practical. However, with a technology like virtual reality, in some cases, you can also give them that experience prior to working on that machines, just like airplane simulations. Okay,
Yeah.
but virtual reality is still an infancy technology. It's still very expensive or not necessarily affordable. So this is why we talk of hybrid teaching and blended learning in that case. So now someone has to work, let's say, on a machine. Okay, I don't know, to do some printing. That's not necessarily in a scenario. But scenario-based learning is often good where the students have to show multitude of skills like dealing with the public, knowing their job, which is part of it technical, and then having, let's say, to deal with project management and so on. So where they need to deal with customers. Each pedagogy, whether it's scenario-based, whether it's activity-based or classic content-based, it depends really on the situation that you have in hand.
Okay, so from what you are explaining, I see that cases where, for example, this scenario-based learning set of materials that you have prepared, it is more meant for an enrichment process before someone actually goes down into the workshop or into the kitchen. So you need that kind of enrichment and so that the students get aware of what to look for before they go and touch and handle the equipment and so on. All right. Yes, you're saying?
You can improve that preparatory phase, in fact.
Yes, we can do that as well. Just to share with you, from our point of view, we are also trying to redefine the word hybrid learning since you mentioned about hybrid learning. Actually, we are calling it hybrid teaching. Hybrid teaching means the teaching of one class simultaneously, face-to-face and online. Just like, so that's where the confusion comes in. The hybrid teaching is a classroom where I can teach 20 students face-to-face, but at the same time, there are 10 students online who wants to learn. So this is another new dimension that I think you have to look into because there goes blended learning and so on. How are we going to blend all those kind of things so that the teacher becomes much more well-versed with these new terminologies that we are coming out. For the last question, I think I'm very much interested to look at one of your slides, Professor Isaac, if you can go back and the first few slides that you talk about the role of the teacher. I'm not sure which number was it. You have got orchestration.
The one on activity-based learning just before that.
I think so, yeah. Sorry, I can't remember the...
No, that's okay, that's okay. It's here. Here.
Yeah, that's it. So the teacher's role is orchestration, monitoring and guidance. So in the world where we are transitioning from the traditional mindset to that of a new world where everything is going online, plus you're talking about hybrid and so on, can we safely say that the teaching hours of a lecture is made up of orchestration hours, monitoring hours, and guiding hours? It's no longer I'm teaching in the classroom, that kind of mindset. Is that something we can agree on?
exactly, it's a very important point, and in fact, it is a problem for university management because our systems. This is why I say it is teacher-centered. It means a course is calculated on the number of hours that the lecturer will go and actually talk in the classroom. Okay?
Yeah.
Teaching the student. Oh, now it has changed. This is why we talk about workload nowadays. So the teaching component, the contact phases will be one part, but you will need that preparation, orchestration, monitoring, answering the student. That also will have to be accounted for. Yes, it's no longer that 45 hours of teaching, 25 hours of teaching, and so on.
Yes, yes. So we're having that problem now. How we redefine teaching hours? You know, we've got things about student learning time, but how about lecturers teaching time? You know, those kind of things that we have got to have a look. Dr. Yousra, anything on those thoughts?
No, it's okay on my side.
All right. So I think we have no more questions on this side. So I would like to thank both of you for your participation as panelists and to share your presentation, your thoughts, and your practices from University of Mauritius. Your institution looks very lovely and nice. Been great for us to visit there, not just online, but also face to face. Just a reminder to everyone, please fill in this post survey at the end of the session. So there is that URL there, so if you can go in and fill it in, then we can get some feedback from this survey. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much from BIPD or the Division of Instructional and Digital Learning, Polytechnics Malaysia and College Community Malaysia. We'd like to thank you very much for your participation and for your sharing this today. And this is the first day of the webinar. You are speaker number 3, right? So you are slot number 3. We have got another slot here. The next one coming up at 4 o'clock that will look into VR and AR and teaching and so on and so forth. So thank you again. Salam to you, Prof, and also good day to you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.